Hi, everyone. It's Candace Craw-Goldman again from quantumhealers.com. Back again with another, what a great question. So underneath one of my last videos, somebody asked, what do you say to those who claim that BQH or quantum healing is just as dangerous as using a Ouija board? Now, that's a pretty big question, actually, and it's not the first time I've heard it. So today, let's unpack it. We'll do it gently and honestly, but with some good old-fashioned discernment. Okay, so let's start by talking about why anyone would ask that question. Where does this idea come from? And let's name the common concern behind the question in general. So it usually comes from a place of worry or fear that any contact with any non-physical realm or spirit is risky business. And honestly, it's not entirely wrong. But here's the thing. The difference between a kind of chaotic curiosity and intentional communication is really basically everything. So let's talk about Ouija boards first. Most energy healers across all traditions, Reiki and, all up and down the line, agree that tools like Ouija boards can be dangerous when they're used without understanding or discernment or knowledge about what they're getting into. Okay, well, why is that? Well, they're typically used without intention and without grounding. And these tools can open a door. It's like an open invitation. It's not like asking who's coming in. It's just like leaving your own front door of your house open. And that's just never a good idea. So there's no filter to any consciousness or entity or fragment of entity can jump in and wreak some havoc, play dress up, pretend to be other people. This game, this board, is often used by kids or at parties without things like protection or discernment or even the belief that anything real is happening, just like it's all pretend, right? Except for sometimes some things very real and very disruptive can happen. In fact, Dolores Cannon herself warned against them. She did. People would ask about this in classes, and she would say, you don't know who you're talking to. Just because they say they're someone doesn't mean that they are. And she wasn't wrong either. There are countless stories from both clients and practitioners who've experienced energetic, maybe unpleasant residue or confusion, even some emotional upsets or disturbances following the casual or fearful use of any tool, or especially something like a Ouija board. So it's not about the board itself being bad, but there's some ways of thinking about that too. It's mostly about the unguarded, unfiltered access, right, to realms beyond ordinary perception. Okay, so now let's talk about how that contrasts with quantum healing, like QHHT and BQH. So both QHHT and BQH are safe and structured methods to connect with higher aspects of consciousness. There's guided experiences, right? You have a practitioner. And most of these practitioners, most of the clients, most of these sessions are begun with a clear intention from the very beginning about, what they're meaning to do, what they're trying to find out, and what aspect of their expanded consciousness they're trying to connect with. And in most of these sessions, the practitioner helps to create kind of a sacred space. And it's created with care and respect and concern for the client. And most practitioners do grounding ceremonies or practices for both themselves and they suggest for the client. And of course, they keep discernment top of mind. So these kind of quantum healing sessions aren't throwing open a random door. It's it's tuning in to very specific frequencies, inviting only those aligned with the highest good to participate, especially in BQH. We make sure that that's what happens in BQH. So nobody is summoning evil spirits or evil entities in any kind of quantum healing session. We're engaging with higher aspects of the client's self, with source-connected guides, with loving, wise, and evolved energies who often only respond because we've taken the time to do all these things, to ground, align, and ask with reverence. Are there some outlying experiences? Of course, and you can always bring that up and mention them. But in general, that's what we are focused on, and focused on that and creating that. So let's talk about actually the differences, a key difference between QHHT and BQH and the role of intention. This is where BQH, which is, of course, beyond quantum healing, takes things even further, because I learned early on, studying with and working with Dolores and doing QHHT, that the intention of the client and the intention of the practitioner were so important. And sometimes those intentions were very well and obvious and stated, and sometimes they weren't. So with BQH, it was built to focus on intentionality from the very beginning, with the foundational aspect of BQH being heart connected and intentional exploration, with the benefit of the client and all in mind. So the power of energy and frequency and intention. And BQH uses alchemy, and we connect to the heart, and we do a sacred connection, and we do energetic protection and clearing, alchemy and rituals as part of the method from the very beginning, before we ever even get going. And Dolores did that too in her own way, in a way that was a little more traditional, a little more subdued, right? She used the white pyramid of light, and basically called it good there. So quantum healers understand how incredibly important intention is, both the intention of the client and the practitioner. Foundational for the entire experience. Again, we are focused upon benevolent, heart-focused contact with any and all expanded consciousness. Okay. So this ends up being the difference between sort of walking blindfolded into a busy street versus walking mindfully through a sacred garden that you've lovingly prepared to visit and have an experience in. So energy healers know that discernment is the key. Ask any experienced healer and they'll say the same thing. And spiritual hygiene matters. Your thoughts matter, right? The things you subject yourself to, the things that you spend time with, all of those things matter. Same with your practitioner. And intent absolutely shapes the outcome. And where you are matters, right? If you're playing with the Ouija board, who else might be playing with the Ouija board? What's their intention? What has that particular Ouija board been used for in the past? And you could get even more deep, even thinking about this. You can even think about, well, who is the person in the factory who was putting the board in the box? What were their ideas about what this board was going to be used for? There's an energetic connection there too, right? An energetic connection to what might happen with its use. I mean, of course, there's tentacles in all of this, right? So with BQH and other mindful quantum healing modalities, we honor the sovereignty of the client. We cultivate connection only with benevolent, wise, high-frequency consciousness. So going back to the hygiene part, some of the tools we might use for this hygiene include, one of my favorite things is salt baths or Epsom salt baths. You can do smudging or cleansing with herbs. You can do visualizations of sacred light, energy shields. That's what Dolores Cannon's white pyramid of light was all about. And of course, you call in for assistance only the highest and most benevolent energies. Sacred prayers, sound tools. And what happens post-session with integration is important too, sort of to evaluate what's happened, who you talked to, what you learned, etc. And these practices are not superstition. They've often been labeled as such, but they're not superstition. They really are energetic hygiene. And you can clear your energy fields. Even doing things like that will clear energy fields. Maybe some of you recently have seen some of the things talked about on social media about bells. There's a real reason that churches had bells. Look it up. Okay, so some misconceptions worth addressing, sort of overall, is that spirit communication is dangerous. And that's just not true. Unstructured or fearful contact with non-physical realms, yeah, that creates a kind of risk, and and some ungrounded communication could happen. But safe, grounded communication through modalities like BQH is almost 100% every time healing and empowering. There's other misconceptions like hypnosis means loss of control, but that's really, really not true. And in BQH, the client is always in control. The higher self is always in control, kind of driving the session forward. And the practitioner is a guide whose energy does affect the session, no doubt about it, but they are a guide. Another misconception, as always, about channeling, that channeling means possession. And in my own personal experience, channeling, the word is so loaded. It's such a loaded word, but channeling is more like listening, right? And then some people, when they listen, they repeat what they hear, right? But channeling is more like listening in my experience. And these quantum healing sessions, what are we doing when we communicate with our higher selves if we are not listening to it? So you can think of it then as a type of channeling. So channeling in BQH is a conscious and cooperative process. I had a client once who came in sort of very skeptical about the process, but came in nonetheless. And many years prior, when she was just a child, she'd had a disturbing experience with the Ouija board, something that left a lasting energetic impression. And she was concerned that anything like BQH and open her up again to the same kind of energies. But we took time to set intentions, and we built trust, and we called in, of course, the highest support. And what happened was beautiful. It really was something lovely. So she didn't connect with just some random being that walked by the open door, but with her own guide and her own higher self. And she was taken back and shown how that specific Ouija board experience was blown completely out of proportion because of her age, her innocence, and her inexperience. So that experience that she had when she was a child was not an uplifting experience. Let's just say it was chaotic, but it was far less dangerous than her memory had even built it up to be. So the BQH session wasn't at all scary. It was sacred. So BQH is not like a Ouija board, not at all. It's a sacred bridging connection to expanded consciousness. And this bridge is built very specifically, and again, with clear intention, with trained facilitation, with love, connection to the heart energies, discernment, and respect for the client's perspective and belief system, because anybody can have a session, no matter what their perspective. If you are interested in communicating with expanded consciousness, maybe learning BQH might be for you. And if you're already a healer, an alternative healer of any kind, please consider joining us at quantumhealers.com. We would love to have you. If you have a question for me, please let me know in the comments or send me an email. You can send me an email at candace@quantumhealers.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, thanks so much. Keep the comments and questions coming in. Until next time, bye for now.